So in referring to religious traditions, in many ways we need conceptual understanding or some sort of employment of concepts to identify them as religious, to individuate them, to demarcate them as opposed to purely secular beliefs. Particularly also the many religious traditions themselves need some sort of conceptual framework or apparatus to distinguish them from each other. Of course, William James, another pragmatist, felt very much that all religions had some sort of practical impact, and if that impact could be the same thing or could ultimately have the same effect, then he would say that those many religions are actually the same, meaning that there's no distinguishing them except by their practical effects. So even if we individuate a religious belief by a causal history or by some sort of descriptive or doctrinal component, James is very clear that in many ways those individuations aren't as important as the actual practical effect. And this practical effect, as I said, is the one that really in some ways distinguishes the effect or the non-religious state from the religious state. That's why he says things like, the many religions are like an alphabet, and that, God uses all of them in some way to spell out a message to us. And in that sense, the effect, if it was actually the same for different religious traditions, would make them or would type them as actually the same tradition. So the interesting thing is if you have a non-believer and a believer who are each, doing the same thing with the same effect, other than the internal role of the state or of the, intentional attitude of the mind, and other than that internal role, there's really nothing that distinguishes them. Say, for instance, I'm, helping an old lady cross the street, and say I'm doing it intending, a tip, or say I'm doing it intending to get political clout so I can run for office. All of these sorts of acts would actually be different themselves, but if they all had the same effect in the world, for a pragmatist, these would basically all collapse.